Hi guys, today we are working with watercolors and gouache. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've really wanted to learn how to combine the two, but I've never really dedicated myself to learning it. And this is officially my step in the direction of learning how to combine the two, learning how to use gouache with watercolors. There are a lot of really amazing benefits that can come from working with gouache with your watercolors, and I really want to reap those benefits. I've been feeling like there's a lot of limitations that I want to move past with my watercolors. And I know that with gouache, it'll open up more doors. I'm really excited about this. So we can go ahead and get started working on the painting. I will tell you all about some of the things that I've learned with gouache, the things that I'm struggling with, the things that I've loved. So yeah, let's go ahead and start this hopefully magical, exciting journey into watercolor gouache land. So diving in with the painting, I'm starting off with watercolors. I want to get a base of everything down and then I can start working with the gouache. The order of how I want to implement them is definitely going to be a learning curve. I think there's going to be a lot of trial and error of figuring out when I can use things best. I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't, I'm using acrylic gouache, which is different than artist gouache. Artist gouache is gouache that's remains water soluble even after it's dried, so you can reactivate it. I'm not really familiar with that particular type of gouache. I don't use it a ton, so I've been using acrylic gouache, which is basically matte acrylic paint. So in a lot of ways it's closer to that than it is to watercolors, but it works really, really well with it. It waters down in a way that looks pretty convincingly watercolor, and it's matte, so it doesn't have a sheen to it on top of the watercolors, which is really the big thing. I need it to camouflage really well so that everything marries together. But anyways, the order of how to approach what medium is definitely going to be something that I'm going to learn as I work on it. The acrylic gouache is a lot more water resistant, I would say, but not waterproof. So if I really scrub at it, or if I let a lot of water sit on top of it, I've noticed that it'll start to lift up a bit, or it can, depending on the paint and certain environmental elements. But for now, the thing that I think I'm most comfortable with is basically, as much as I can, getting the watercolor down first and then building up gouache. The gouache, I think I'm going to rely really heavily on creating highlights, which I'm really excited about. That's something that I don't get the pleasure of with watercolors, because to have a highlight, it's really just not painting something, rather than the joy of adding in a highlight, which is really satisfying. I really miss that. I miss the level of control, because I tend to always accidentally paint over areas that I intended to have preserved as a highlight. So being able to use gouache more like this, it will allow me to pop back in those lighter values and some opposing colors, which is specifically what I'm doing in this piece. A different lighting source that has this very pink color to it, so that I can go in and create that really saturated and specific color that's a rim light around the clouds and the character. And I don't have to worry about very carefully preserving an area with my watercolors and then painting right up against that line. It's something that I've attempted in the past, and I've never really been happy with that level of control. And this painting and the other two in the series are available as the original over at my shop. I love doing these little paintings, so I would love to send them off to a new home. There again is that link down in the description that'll take you over there to check that out. And the 3 stickers are actually the April sticker pack for Patreon. So if you'd like to get these stickers mailed to you, you can either sign up for the sticker pack tier or the print tier by the last day of April. And there's a link down in the description that'll take you over to my Patreon as well if you're interested in that. I also started much looser with some elements in my watercolors than I usually do, and I really, really enjoyed it, for one, but it also was to bridge the gap between how I wanted to use the gouache in this painting and how I use my watercolors. I tend to prefer to do my watercolors in a very controlled way, where I create fairly flat washes, but I've been trying to pull away from that and trying to do things a little bit more painterly, and in the moment allow myself to just feel out the shapes and let things be a little bit more textural. I don't do that very often. I just would like to do that more. So I made sure that the cloud shapes, the way that I approached it with my watercolors, it allowed me to do that, to build up the value with these blocky textural shapes that I had a lot of fun putting down. And it did lead into the way that I was going to apply the gouache in that pink rim lighting that I'm talking about, that you'll see soon, hopefully. But yeah, I think that looking for ways to bridge the gap between how I do use watercolors and how I would use gouache will help a lot, because with the gouache right now, I'm not really comfortable with how to actually handle it. I can use it in the way that I will use it in this piece, in a way that's a little bit more expressive and painterly. I love using it that way, but I don't have the understanding of the medium well enough to be able to do a very controlled effect outside of a very strict, clean line. So by bringing that into my watercolors, it does help each of them play off each other a little bit better, which is something that I'm really looking for. In the past, when I've used both these together, it's been really obvious. The gouache really stands out, and not in a good way. I didn't really control the texture of it very well, and that is one thing that I have learned that I'll talk a bit about, is controlling the texture of the gouache in a way that I have struggled with and now I'm doing a little bit better with. But looking for any way for me to be able to make the gouache look and feel more like watercolor and have the watercolor marry into the gouache more is going to make me happier. But anyways, the textural thing, this is something that when I was first playing with gouache, as in any time before right now, I really struggled with, and I was mixing it too thickly, so it would preserve brush strokes, and it had kind of this pasty look to it on the paper. And it looked more like I was trying to fix an issue rather than something that was melding really well with the painting that was already established and with the paper. And I found that I can add more water than I originally thought. And it builds up really nicely too. That's something that I'm also learning that I really enjoy, is that I can go in with a more transparent wash with the gouache and let that dry, and then I can go in with another of that exact same mixture and just build it up slowly, and then that gouache appears really smooth and it becomes more and more opaque, so I can control the opacity better, but it's not thick and pasty, and it doesn't, again, preserve the texture of the brush. It just keeps it really smooth, so it integrates a lot better with how the watercolor appears on the paper. That is something that's I'm definitely going to want to jump off with more as I practice it more, because I think that there's a lot that could be controlled with the way that I'm mixing it, with the opacity of the gouache, and I think there's a lot of really cool effects that I could achieve that way. So moving forward with it, I would love to be able to understand the limits of how transparent can I make the washes in gouache, and how opaque can I make them and still get a really smooth application. Yeah, there's just a lot of things like that I'm excited to explore, but I am learning that the confines that I thought it lived within is larger than I originally thought. The other thing that I have been using gouache for with my watercolors, and I've done this a bit in the past, I absolutely love it, and that's to do the line work. This has been quite the challenge for years for me. Or I've been trying to find the perfect method for creating the line work for my watercolors, and I love the gouache. It works really well. It's opaque even when it's a light color. I find that it spreads so much easier than watercolor when I'm trying to create a really thin, consistent line. Something about the way that the paint is mixed, where it's a bit thicker, it flows really well when I mix it correctly. And it's a huge struggle when I try to do something similar with watercolors alone. So I've been really happy with that in the past. I completely forgot about it. I've been a bit rusty with my watercolors lately, but I brought it back in this piece, and it's just so satisfying to do the line work that way. I find that it works best with a really thin but long brush. That way it holds a lot of paint within the bristles and I can get a much smoother, longer stroke with my lines. But yeah, I think that will be a foundational core element of how I will incorporate the gouache with my watercolors, because it's, for one, something that I already do, but it is also taking a role that watercolors or other methods have used and were always present in my work, and now it can just be gouache. So again, it's just gonna lock things in so that while the texture, it's matte, it's fairly similar, it's a little bit different, but being able to have that texture present in the line work and then have it in special details or highlights or darker areas too, I can really enhance that with my line work. So I'm just so excited to do more of that. I just completely forgot about it. I forgot that I had that epiphany, and I did a watercolor piece a little bit ago, a little one, and I struggled through the line work using just the watercolors, and it was really refreshing to use my more preferred method this way. I would also really like to use gouache potentially in the future to create really dark black areas. I do that fairly frequently in my work. I like to have really graphic black sections, elements, and sometimes I'll use like a micron pen. Other times I'll try to layer the watercolors, but the watercolors never quite get dense enough, and micron pens can have a different look to them. They do have a bit of a sheen sometimes, or if the pen isn't really fresh, it can be a little bit transparent, so you can see some of those like hatched lines in it. So being able to go in and create just this really crisp, opaque, matte gouache shape with black is going to be really pleasant. Or even not just black. There's a lot of options for really rich, dark colors that are a lot more difficult to achieve with watercolors. And I love that. That's one of the things that I love about oil paints, is that I can get really rich dark colors. That is something that I haven't really done a ton with my gouache, especially with like implementing it in anything like a shadow, anything that's not strictly like a graphic shape. So that'll take a little bit of practice, a little bit of experimenting for how to use it for things that I might want to blend in more with a shape rather than just really standing out the crisp outline. But it's an option that I'm excited about, something that I feel is a bit of a weakness with watercolors, getting really, really dark colors, dark, bold, consistent colors. Oh, and one tip that I have found extremely helpful when I first started using gouache, it was extremely frustrating because it would dry out so quickly. I felt like I was always fighting that, and if I wasn't paying attention, that mixture of paint that I carefully spent time on would be completely dry or mostly dry, and then I didn't have enough paint to finish it, and I hated that. It made the process of using gouache really unpleasant. And since learning that I could just mist it with a mister, a little spray bottle, it's been significantly better. I'll just mist my little palette that I have my paint mixed up on every once in a while, and it will keep it fresh and moist, and I can just keep working with it and it stays active. And that has been a game changer. That has been the difference between it being an unpleasant medium to use for myself. I hated how quickly it dried, and now it's not an issue. It is kind of a muscle memory thing that I have to get used to. Again, I have to get used to not really even thinking about it, just spraying it every once in a while, because if I don't make it more of like a habit, I'm going to forget and things will dry out. But if I really just make it more, I just pick up the squirt bottle or the spray bottle, and I take care of that every so often. I just get used to that being a habitual thing while I'm painting, then it won't be something that has to take up brain space as much. And that way I can use my paints well. I won't feel like they're being wasted, and I'll be happy with that. I'll be happy with the process of using it. One thing that I would like to get better at, and this is a really small thing, but I squirt out way too much paint when I'm using these. I really need like a fraction of what ends up on my palette when I'm mixing. And I hate wasting paint. I'll oftentimes try to scoop up that paint and put it back in the tube, which is really annoying. I just need to get better at getting less paint to come out of the tube when I'm using it. So a bit more specifically about this piece, I talked about how I wasn't really exactly sure about the order of working with watercolors and gouache and when I should switch to the other or use the other. And I do feel like this one got a little off the rails, but not necessarily in a tragically bad way. It was a lot more experimental than I really even thought it would be at the beginning. Usually those go really awry for me, but it worked out really well in this piece. I really was able to enjoy the process. I enjoyed experimenting with it. I think I was just lucky that it kind of pulled together and worked together, but one of the things that was a little of a bumpy road to get to that final thing that I liked and was happy with was her hair. I went in with watercolors to do line work first because, again, I forgot that I wanted to do gouache for the line work. So I did that first. It was annoying and tedious and I didn't like the results. So then I started going in with gouache, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't even plan on redoing the line work. I was just kind of adding bolder patches of hair and areas that just had more blue to it. And it was somehow something that came together slowly. I then ended up replacing all the line work, and then I ended up painting in all of her hair again with a wash in watercolors, which, by the way, the line work held up really well in that instance where I made sure it was totally dry. And then I did that wash on top of the line work and her hair, and it married the two together, and somehow it turned into hair that I was happy with. But that was really just like a much more chaotic approach than I normally do. I very rarely am able to make something like that in that kind of process work. I usually have to know exactly what I'm doing, but it worked out. I was happy with it. Next time when I work with gouache, I need to be more clear on what exactly I'm doing with it. What is the purpose of it in that moment, in that specific area of the piece, and why am I using gouache over watercolor or vice versa. I just need to be more thoughtful about which one I'm picking and what is the end goal? What is it supposed to do for the piece? Because there were a few areas in this piece where I just kind of was just going at it, and it did work out, but I would prefer to know why and how to replicate it. Don't forget, these original paintings are up for sale at my shop. The link is in the description, and they are the stickers for Patreon for April for the theme Night Rain Dreams. I love that theme. I really enjoyed working on these. But yes, if you would like to get this pack of stickers, make sure to sign up for the sticker pack tier or the print tier by the last day of April, and I'll be able to send them out to you next month. And that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to all of my amazing patrons. You guys are the reason that I'm able to make art like this daily. Thank you so much for all of your support, and I'll see you guys next time.